name is Elizabeth Andersen, and I am the former Chief Resident here at Southern Regional AHEC. Before that, I was also our Junior Chief Resident, and I was actually an attendant at this conference for the last 2 years. I learned a lot. I had a great time, going through the various activities that we have, discussions, and especially making connections with other Chief Residents throughout the country. So I'm excited that you all have the same opportunity to do that and take the best parts of this conference back to your own program as well. A little bit about me. So I'm from Utah. I followed my husband, who's in the military here, and I'm planning on doing just outpatient family medicine for the next few years as soon as I graduate. Today we'll be talking about scheduling and some of the lessons that I've learned over my last 2 years doing the resident schedule. And I hope that I can share some of the pitfalls that I experienced and give some guidance that hopefully will help you all make your schedules even better when you start working on them soon. So the first and most important rule is to know the rules. And if you don't know them, to be able to know where to access them and to be able to refer to them often. Your schedule is going to be the best it can be when it is following the ACGME work hours, which are a requirement, of course, for your residents to not go over those. I've included the link here that talks about the maximum hours of clinical and educational work per week so that you can refer to that easily when you are making the schedule and then answering questions about the schedule later in the year. I do want to make a note that this is just common program requirements that apply to all specialties, but you should make sure to check with your specialty specific requirements and to see if there's anything additional or exceptions that can be made so that you're following all of those ACGME required rules. The next important tenet is to be fair and to be flexible, and sometimes those things can be difficult to do together. So it's important to remember that change is going to happen no matter how well you plan. We do our schedule before the start of the year for the entire year, and so we're trying to plan out months and almost a year in advance, which can be difficult. And we of course know that change is going to be required, whether that is residents getting sick, having to take time off, vacations that need to show up so you can go to your sister's wedding, or other things like that. So if you let the residents that you work with know that change is inevitable from the very beginning, they're going to be willing to work with you when those occurrences come up, and you'll have that better reception to that 6 a.m. phone call saying, hey, I really need you to be here and cover this shift for one of your colleagues. The second is to have a plan for backup coverage. This is actually interesting, and I wasn't sure how to talk about this because currently at SR-AHEC we don't have a backup schedule. I have an inkling that that's actually going to change in the next couple of years, and I think that'll be a great thing, and I would recommend that you at least consider having a backup schedule. Right now, and how we've done it here for many years, is that if someone needs a call change or they're unable to show up to their shift, they notify the chief resident, who talks with the program director, the junior chief resident, and the scheduling or the scheduler, so that we can figure out who is the best person to take over that shift last minute. This can be challenging because it means that you're having to decide on the fly, sometimes very early in the morning or very late at night, who you feel like you can call, you feel like will not have anything to be going on, isn't on PTO, willing to work in the hospital. All of those things can make deciding that person difficult and challenging. However, because this has been, the policy here at SR-AHEC, I actually have not ever had any problems when I call someone up at 5 or 6 a.m. I've never had someone tell me no. And part of that is, I think, fostering that community of support and saying, hey, I know this is not ideal for you, but you could be on the other side of this situation at any time in the future. Do you mind helping me out today? Or if you think, hey, I can't find anyone to cover this, this is too last minute, I'm available, then stepping up yourself and taking that shift. And I've certainly done that. I know there was one particular experience where it was actually over Thanksgiving weekend, and one of our residents wasn't able to attend her hospital shift, and I said, you know what, everyone's got family here, I don't have anyone coming to see me, so I just went to the hospital and covered it. So that's also an option. However, all of those kind of stressful last minute decisions could be alleviated if you had a backup schedule planned in advance. So that means that you say, this is the person for this call schedule, these are the individuals who are on this month, But in case anything happened, here is the schedule of residents that we would call first and second if we needed someone to cover. That would presumably go out with the rest of the schedule so that people knew that, hey, I'm kind of on backup call, I should stay available, keep my phone on, even though the likelihood of that backup schedule being used is fairly small because, as you know, residents are hard workers, we're all here to learn, we're here to work, and so I think for the vast majority, people show up for those shifts because they know it's important. So, thoughts about backup coverage there. And then of course one example is COVID. We had to make a lot of scheduling exceptions and changes and last minute things for residents that were tested for COVID, and what do we do about quarantine, and how long are they out of the hospital, who is covering. And so that is actually the only time at SR-AHEC that I know that we've had kind of a tentative backup schedule, and that was utilized, I'd say, a couple of weeks over the last year. People knew that, hey, you're on one of our clinic rotations this month, but you may be called to be in the hospital if one of the upper levels or senior residents is out. It worked pretty well. We didn't have a lot of concerns, and I think things flowed pretty well with that, which is why I think we'll probably be going to a general backup coverage schedule as well. So be fair. Make sure that you're asking folks to contribute to shifts equally, but be flexible. Know that sometimes you may need to step in, sometimes you need to think creatively about what you need to do to make sure that shift gets covered. The next thing is to take the middle ground. So, on the one end of the spectrum, you are the chief resident. When you get that call at 5 in the morning, sometimes it may just be easier to say, oh, I'll just do it, I'll go into the hospital, I don't want to call anyone, I don't want to ask them. And I think that's okay to do some of the time. But if you're doing that every single time a resident calls out, you are going to get burned out quickly, and you're just going to not enjoy your time being a chief resident and being a resident because you are taking on all of these extra shifts. So on the one end, don't overload yourself, don't take every extra shift that you have to. However, please don't be that resident that says, oh, I've got a little bit of scheduling control and I'm going to make sure that I get every holiday off and take some long weekends here and there. So there's definitely finding that middle ground where you take a fair number of shifts that you should be covering, but you also aren't taking too many and aren't taking every chance to have off that you can. Residents have a great feel for how you're treating them and how fair you're being, and they will ask you, they will ask the program director if they feel like they're not being treated equally. So take the middle ground. Next, it's so important to delegate when you can. Just like you don't want to be overwhelmed taking shifts, you also don't want to be overcome doing all of the work that a chief resident is called on to do. Some of that work you need to be able to delegate, and I listed here a bunch of different individuals that may be similar or a little different in your program that you may need to reach out to. So of course you're going to be working with your program director, the program coordinator like Cheryl. She's either talking before or after this about how important that relationship is with your coordinator to make sure that you and she or he are on the same page and delegating work between the two of you when it's appropriate. Your clinic scheduler is going to be key in making sure that for those last minute shift adjustments, you can find the best person to cover that job. Obviously, making sure that you are working with your co-residents. So, sometimes, I've been asked to be on this committee or to work on this or to do this other specific job, and I say, listen, I just can't do that right now, but I have a great resident in mind who would be better suited. Don't be afraid to do that. Part of being a chief resident and being a leader is knowing what you can take on, what would be better in someone else's hands, whether they have more time or more experience in that area, and making sure that you can make and do make the decision to take on what you can do, but to also share what you can't. And then working with your support staff as well. So delegate when appropriate. Next, next is to plan the schedule as far in advance as possible. So we, like I mentioned earlier, actually plan our schedule in March or April of the year for the upcoming year. So that means that before the academic year even starts, every resident knows what calls they'll have for the entire week, what rotations they'll be able to take PTO on, and all of those challenging aspects of residency that can make getting your time away difficult, connecting with friends and family. And so giving them that really long buffer of time to make decisions about their PTO and when they need their schedule to be heavy or light is really important, and I know that the residents here have really appreciated that. I know that because we have a couple of rotations, our ER specifically, where the program actually at the hospital makes our schedule as far as ER shifts go, and we don't get our schedule until a few days before the start of the rotation. This makes it incredibly difficult to plan your month. You don't know what weekends, if any, you'll have off. You don't know, when you can see friends and family. And I know that that brings a lot of angst and just some discouragement about having that control over your life that is really important in residency. We don't have a lot of control over our schedule, so it's important to give the residents that control when you can. So planning that far in advance is difficult because you're having to think of issues that can occur 3 and 6 and 9 and 12 months in the future, but I think by and large it's absolutely worthwhile to do it as far in advance as you can. Additionally, resolving conflicts as soon as you can is important too. So I would much rather have a resident come to me and say, hey, my brother just got engaged, I'm gonna have to go to his wedding in 3 months, what can we do to get these calls or this hospital shift covered? It's easy to find someone to cover in 3 months. You've got a long list of people that you can call or make plans yourself. It's much, much better to do that than the week or a couple of days before say, hey, I've got this thing I probably should have told you about, but I didn't. So I would encourage you to speak with your residents and say it is much easier to change the schedule further in advance, so please let me know as soon as you can if there's going to be any changes that need to be made. And then, once you have that perfect schedule for the year locked into place, of course there are going to be call switches. Residents are going to want to, have this weekend golden, and this weekend they're happy to work. So they're going to come up with those call switches and approach you with them, or your program director, or your clinic schedule, however your program does it. So I would just encourage you, it can be very easy when you're doing the whole schedule to remember work hour violations and to be thinking about, well, what are they on this month and next month and how many hours have they worked that week? It's harder to get in that frame of mind when you're just switching single days later in the year. So just double check that anytime you make a call switch or a hospital shift switch, that you're making sure that no work hour violations will be made. We don't want to get in any trouble with ACGME. See back to rule number 1 about knowing the rules. So make sure that you're thinking about that for every change that you make. And then lastly, making sure that you're being fair and transparent. Open, honest communication is going to get you so far with your residents. Saying, hey, this is how we do the schedule, this is why we do it this way, this is how you can tell me so we can make changes so I can help you in return. If you aren't being open and honest and clear with how you do things, people are going to have misconceptions. They may not trust that you are being fair with their time and with your time. And so just having that open atmosphere and being very transparent about all of the choices that you make is very important to just maintain that positive and supportive residency community. So those are my scheduling tips and tricks. If you have any other questions or are interested in how we specifically do our schedule, I think my contact information is included in the deck of slides and the pamphlet that you all get. So please look me up and email me. I'm always happy to answer questions or talk with you about what I would recommend to do scheduling. We've definitely made changes since I've been here, and I think there's always room for improvement. So I'm sure our new residents for this year, Kelly and Jason, will be very excited to hear how you all are planning to do the schedule so we can make changes if we need to as well. So thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the conference, and best of luck with residency and your professional life.